Hello and welcome to Mooncast Episode 2. I'm Ida Pembroke,
And I'm Lauren from Taro and Chai.
and today we are talking about the full moon in Leo.
So today we've cast this chart from Texas in the United States. So if you're looking for a city to cast this from, that's going to be from Austin, Texas. The time is 10:56 a.m. on February 16th. So if you're casting this from other parts of the world or a little bit further north, you might want to go ahead and cast a chart for February 16th, 10:56 a.m., Austin, Texas. And that's in Central Time, so just kind of change that to fit whatever time zone you're in.
And
So,
that will show you the moment when the full moon is exact.
yes. So this lunation is really interesting because we've had this kind of transition with Pluto and a lot going on with Mercury. At the new moon in Aquarius, we had Pluto conjunct the Icy. So you've got this planet that's about, kind of trauma and secrets and things kind of beneath the surface conjunct the Icy. And during the full moon in Leo, it's kind of come full circle and it's conjunct the midheaven now. And so it's like we have all of this stuff that we're either, keeping in or trauma that we're dealing with or things that we're just not really wanting to face. And then the full moon gives us this chance to release it. And with that Mercury kind of thrown into that conjunction, um, you might even turn that into something either verbal or a written form. So, kind of writing those thoughts out to release them, or getting that message to someone, communicating with someone to release whatever it is you've been holding in since that new moon. So, I think that's
The
kind of
way
the
that
big
you've
part.
been,
Okay.
sorry, the way that you've been talking about this reminds me of a volcano. It's almost like the new moon with having Pluto being in the underworld. It's creating this pool of lava underground that's just building pressure and building pressure and building pressure. And then at the full moon in Leo, it's erupting with Pluto on the MC, and it's making all of these things that have been going on in hiding be suddenly highly visible, and like you said, in a really verbal way. So like a verbal volcano, like it could show up in the form of an altercation, or something that you've been percolating on under the surface that needs to be transformed. It could be bubbling up to the surface, and like Pluto transformations, I mean, I don't want to sugarcoat them, but sometimes a transformation is really necessary. And you might find yourself in a position where you really need to make a major change, and you find that you suddenly have the words to cause this change to happen in a way that you didn't have a couple of weeks ago, when maybe you felt deep down inside like you really needed them.
Yeah, and I like that, especially with Mars kind of being in that same area there with Pluto. Things might have a tendency to be a bit more explosive than we intend them to kind of come across.
Absolutely.
Because especially like all that stuff just going on in Capricorn there, you've got Pluto and Mars and Venus conjunct. So you've got all of this energy and passion that might be a little bit difficult to control.
Absolutely. But I think that the fact that Pluto was on the IC was maybe a good thing for the last lunation. It might cause people to feel pretty frustrated, like they've been sitting on these changes that they really needed to make, and they're just, you know, getting to a breaking point. But on the other hand, having the time to think things through and having the time to process things under the surface might make it more easy to work with, because probably there's going to be less of an element of surprise.
Yeah, and so the other thing that we have going on during this lunation, um, we've got the sun and moon square the nodes. So if you kind of want to talk on that.
Yeah, that is a really interesting aspect. So I'm going to be coming at this from an evolutionary perspective. If you look at this from a traditional perspective or from a Vedic perspective, you're going to see the nodes very differently. But I think that the evolutionary perspective is really illuminating, especially when you see it in the context of that relationship with Pluto. I mean, when you're talking about Pluto and the nodes, you're definitely in evolutionary territory. So, when we're talking about squares to the nodes, what exactly do we mean? In the branch of evolutionary astrology that I practice, that's really heavily influenced by Stephen Forrest, the nodes of the moon represent the path of personal development that you are trying to follow in this lifetime. The South Node represents things from your past, especially things that you're trying to move on from. The South Node can represent talents and skills that you've developed, but the skills and talents of the South Node are largely things that you're good at, but you have been doing them for so long, they're very tired. And so it's kind of like, if you've become an expert in your field and things that are interesting to a newbie are just like things that you feel like you're doing over and over again, like those are the types of skills of the South Node. And the North Node represents the path of growth for you. It is the pole star that feels impossibly far away, but the place that you very much long to be. And when we're talking about the nodes of the moon for the collective, we're talking about those kinds of things for humanity as a whole. And recently, the nodes of the moon shifted so that the south node, the past, the stuff that we're trying to get over, is in Scorpio. And the north node is in Taurus. So collectively, humanity is trying to move into this more Taurian place. And what that means is that we are looking for security, we're looking for pleasure in simple things, we're looking for opportunities to get back into nature. And even though Taurus is ruled by Venus, which is the planet of relationships, on the whole, we're looking for pleasures of solitude. Both Scorpio and Taurus are signs that are really interested in solitude. But Scorpio is the kind of solitude where you're kind of psychoanalyzing yourself and maybe psychoanalyzing the people around you. Whereas Taurus is just the pleasure of maybe sitting on your front step, drinking a cup of tea and watching. Well, right now I'm watching an incredible rainbow out my window, which is amazing, and also very Taurian. Stopping to stare at a rainbow is such a Taurian experience. So I think it might on the surface be a little bit surprising that we are in the process of um, moving into collectively this sign that is associated with solitude. But I think that one of the potential ways of understanding the way that COVID times have been is solitude has driven us nuts, and it has tended to drive us nuts in a scorpionic way. I think that the people and the parts of us that are having the hardest time with uh, physical distancing and social distancing is the part of us that has the tendency to like pick at itself when we're left by ourselves. Now that's not Scorpio, like as a whole, but that's definitely one of the sides of Scorpio when Scorpio isn't at its best. Um, and I think back to the beginning of the pandemic when everybody was playing video games where everybody was like farming and building their houses and baking bread and redecorating their homes and those kinds of simple pleasures. And I almost feel like that beginning of the pandemic was kind of a preview of what we're starting to get into with this Taurus time. So that that is a transit that humanity is going to be going through for the next year and a half or so, since it just started. And this lunation, this full moon in Leo, is highlighting it in a very particular way. When a planet is square to the nodes, it is in a position that, um, as Jeffrey Wolf Green puts it, it represents a skipped step. So humanity as a whole right now is trying to go from that scorpionic place to that Taurus place. But in order to get from Taurus to Scorpio, they have to take care of some unfinished business in Leo and Aquarius. And because the sun and moon are very closely square the nodes, it means that the sun and moon themselves in this lunation represent that skipped step. And what that means in particular is, with the sun in Aquarius, we need to be true to ourselves in order to experience happiness and fulfillment. And with the moon in Leo, we need to be appreciated for who we are. And you can kind of see how the need to be appreciated for who we are and the need to be true to ourselves can be things that are necessary steps in order to move into a Taurian position where we are peaceful and secure. Because if we aren't true to ourselves, we're never going to find peace. And if we aren't appreciated for who we are, we're always going to feel insecure. We're always going to feel like we're a fraud, or we are on the verge of getting fired. It's just really unshaky ground to be on, because fundamentally, it sounds a little bit schoolyard, but we can't be anything other than ourselves. And as long as we are thrust into a role that isn't us, it's always going to naturally be an insecure place to be.
Yeah, and I think stepping back just a little bit and going back to the nodes, um, another thing about this lunation that I feel kind of highlights that access really well is having the south node over there in the seventh house and the north node over in the first house. So it almost kind of it's almost a little redundant in the sense that it's symbolic of that shift from our partnerships and our interactions with others and connection and that sort of theme. And it's almost, just transitioning into this more like isolated sense of self. So I find that kind of interesting as well.
Absolutely.
So I guess the next thing to really cover is the placement of the sun and moon themselves. This balance between the fourth and the 10th house. So with the moon in the fourth house, we have that sense of foundation that you were talking about, just that trying to find some sort of stability in this shift that we've had with the nodes. Um, and stability is with a couple of different transits going on is just going to be a big theme this year. It's been a big theme for a little, maybe the last couple of years. So that sense of stability is going to feel especially difficult with this lunation, because you have the moon in Leo in the fourth house. It's about home. And you have that sun in Aquarius in the 10th house that it's, about work and career and more of those sorts of themes. So it's about finding the balance between the two, especially with this crazy shift that we've had with the pandemic and all of these people kind of working from home. That balance for a lot of people has kind of disappeared, because you go from having the separation between the office and being at home to just your home is your office. how do you,
Mhm.
begin to draw lines when you don't have that experience working remotely? Um, so, and Saturn is, of course, also there in the 10th house in Aquarius, which is about boundaries. So we're having to find ways to draw those lines and really create that separation between our work and home life and find that balance. Now, what are your thoughts on that?
I love how you're bringing in boundaries for so many reasons. Um, Saturn there is such a good point. It's in the middle of Mercury and the Sun, and depending on the orbs you use, it probably is not going to be conjunct either one of them. But it's kind of like it's almost like the giant lead elephant in the room. Like
Mhm.
Mercury is there. Closely conjunct the MC. So there's a need for communicating at work, but also communicating boundaries. And the sun there is all about expressing your individuality. And one of the things that came to mind as you were talking was the it's almost become a meme videos of people who are wearing like suit tops and they're in like pajama bottoms or their underwear and they forget about that fact while they're on camera and they get up and all of a sudden everybody sees what they're really like. I think that there's been a lot of pressure to maintain a certain level of business as usual. I mean, as somebody who has been working from home by myself for a while, it was shocking to me to realize that people would be on camera in a suit. Like, obviously, if you're going to be on camera, you should be decent. But like, part of the
The
purpose
normal
of working
office
from home,
attire.
yeah, part of the purpose of working from home is that you don't need to put a suit on.
Exactly.
So I think that maybe this could represent an opportunity. I hope it represents an opportunity for everybody's sake, for people to have some conversations about, you know, do I really need to wear a $300 suit if I'm going to be on Zoom on a webcam and people aren't really seeing anything other than my face? Like, do we need to keep up these old ossified corporate standards when we're not commuting into a major city to walk into a skyscraper? Like the whole aesthetic and feeling of work is changing, and um, if companies are going to continue this indefinite policy of people being allowed to work from home, uh, we kind of need to have a frank conversation about that Aquarius stuff, because they've been in a position where they can enforce people into literally uniforms for such a long time. But the physical connection, that material world connection, and here we are bringing Saturn in again, is non existent now. And so we can't really go on doing business as usual.
And I think one of my favorite things about that is, especially kind of bringing in more of those Aquarian themes, is that we are starting to see a little bit of that flow of people bringing the stuff that they learned working from home back to the workplace a little bit. Um, and I mean, this came up on one of my previous coworkers' timelines. It's and there's probably a couple of memes floating around like this where you have people showing up on a Friday dressed in the suit top and pajama bottoms with the fuzzy slippers, just having a day where they dressed how you dressed on the Zoom calls. So,
Yes, that's fantastic.
so we're seeing some of those elements of just kind of fun and the more lax work environment, kind of joking about how everything went. Um, But on a more serious note, it's very constructive, which is another Saturn theme, because especially in Aquarius, it can be about establishing a new structure, a new order, and seeing all of these more flexible workplace policies in place is kind of makes me hopeful. because a lot of places aren't transitioning to just going back to the office full time. They're actually kind of bringing in more of that balance and giving people the option to, work from home several days a week, which I think is kind of a good balance.
Absolutely. And I think it's important and timely that we're talking about memes as we're talking about this and the playful um, Friday casual of people being able to wear fuzzy slippers and pajama bottoms into the office because Mercury is a trickster god. And one of the potential manifestations of this is, I mean, this is a Leo lunation, and Leo is the sign of the child. And so doing playful things like Pajama Bottoms Friday is a potentially trickstery way to communicate the need to bring playfulness into our lives and especially into our work environments. So, um, this is a really good lunation for connecting with that playful child energy in a way that is, well, transformational in a Plutonian way.
Yeah, and that's yeah, especially with Leo there. That, for I think a lot of people is a difficult energy to express, because not only are you having to find a way to be expressive, but like you were talking about earlier, you're also wanting to be accepted for it. And so finding that sort of acceptance is often the part that we worry a little bit too much about. And then it keeps us from, you know, actually trying to express ourselves.
Absolutely, especially when we find ourselves in front of audiences, because Leo really is about the relationship between performers and audiences. Um, when we find ourselves in front of audiences that don't appreciate us, it's a very difficult Leo place to be because there's always the question of does this audience not appreciate me because I'm being inappropriate? Or does this audience not appreciate me because they are the wrong audience for me? And there's always the worry if you leave that you're going to end up bouncing from group to group to group to group to group to group. And you're going to end up in this Aquarian situation of being in exile. But when it comes to Leo, and I love that your kitty meowed just there, that is so perfect. Um, Leo really does need that approval. It's the part of us that needs us. And um, because we had such a bad example of leonine energy, and I'm not going to name names, um, so prominent in the United States for so long, I think that we're kind of burned out on it a little bit. But at the same time, we all have it and we all need it. And so we do need to learn how to work with it.
Yeah. And I love as soon as you started talking about that, she decided I wasn't paying enough attention to her.
It's such a perfect example of Leo. I mean, she's the kitten. It's her right, isn't it?
It is. And she's impossible to ignore.
Such a good Leo kitty. If she wasn't so young, I would wonder if she was a Leo herself.
uh,
So,
so
what are your plans for this lunation?
So for this one, I'm not 100% what all I have planned, but I know we're doing our usual full moon circle, and we've been told there's some kind of special exercise or meditation going on, so I'm excited to see what that's about. Um, but those circles are very often about, the much needed release of energy around the full moon period. So
Mm.
I think that's especially fitting for this lunation with our kind of journey from the IC to the MC with Pluto. But for me, I'm stepping back a little bit from a lot of the things that I've been doing, and I'm taking the time to really write them down, get them out into a more physical form where I can actually see the connection between like all of these things that have been going on, because there are so many things that I just haven't really um, expressed. And so it does really fit that new moon we had where you had all this stuff just going on around the IC. Um, and so I'm taking the time to kind of try and get that out so I can have a better look at it and see how it's really manifesting for me. So I'll probably be doing a little bit of that with tarot. Tarot is really my favorite tool for that because there's a lot of symbolism and imagery that helps you get out the things that you didn't even necessarily know were there.
That is fantastic and so very timely.
Hmm. And what about you?
So for me, um, I I have tried for years to get into the full moon ritual thing, and I don't know if it's just because I haven't found the right group or what, but that particular thing hasn't found its time yet. But so that has meant that for me, um, oddly, considering I'm a druid, full moons have been taking a backseat to new moons. I've been spending a lot of energy at the new moon writing intentions, and then at the full moon, I revisit my intentions from the new moon 6 months previously when the moon was new in that sign. And I look at what my intentions were, and uh, in times when my intentions were good and I was able to live up to them and I was able to make progress, I celebrate the progress that I've made. But there are times when a new moon comes along and I'm either not feeling the energy or I am really confused in that area of my life. And well, frankly, have no idea what I was thinking at the time when I was setting that intention. So, um, I looked at my intention from about 6 months ago when the moon was new in Leo, and I just have this list of it from this position. It looks like absolute gobbledygook to me, and I am very much looking forward to opening up my intentions app and deleting that intention and just kind of letting Leo be fallow for 6 months so that I can, well, it's not going to be exactly 6 months, is it? No, it is. It is. Letting Leo be fallow for 6 months so that I can kind of reconnect with my relationship with that energy, which is really important for me because I have Leo rising, and that is an area of my chart that I have really spectacularly struggled with. And I'm hoping that if I can just let it sit and get some distance on it and kind of let it percolate in the background, I will not make such a spectacularly bad mistake when I set my new moon in Leo intention again this summer.
Yeah, and I think because I recently started working with your journal again, the Moon Manifestation Journal, and for me it's almost kind of the opposite because rather than I don't really have those intentions I set because for a couple of years I wasn't doing any journaling whatsoever.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
so now I'm kind of going back and somehow I can remember all of the things that, happened around those times if I just kind of look at the transits and the dates and I can kind of piece it together with like, work projects I did around that time or emails. But I'm kind of going back and looking for those patterns of what was happening at the time and then kind of setting my intentions around what I want to improve about those things. So even if you don't really have that kind of solid practice, or you've taken a break from journaling, a lot of times it's easy to kind of start with the patterns and just examine, how things have been going over the past like 3 to 6 months or however long.
Yeah, absolutely. To be honest, before I made Moon Manifestation Journal, I had a practice for several years where I didn't actually set intentions. at all at the new moon. What I did was I kept a few lines a day journal. So I went back and looked at what was going on, and I had like a sentence or two for each day, and I could see what was happening. And I was like, I could see how seeds that I planted at the new moon started to grow at the full moon. And I spent a couple of years observing what I was planting and what I was harvesting. And I think that having that practice is one of the best things that I have ever done in my astrology and magical practice. Because instead of being, trying to force this vision of who I thought I should be onto my intentions, I was looking at the intentions that I was setting without realizing what I was setting. And I was actually addressing behaviors that I didn't want to have that I was having unconsciously, if that makes any sense. So, as bad as my new moon in Leo intention was, it is a lot better than the intentions that I was setting before I spent a couple of years looking at my own internal patterns in that way,
Yeah.
which is kind of sad to say. I really have a difficult time with this sign.
Well, and I think that's the most helpful, part of this journal is because we are making those observations and, kind of seeing, just the sort of like, I mean, we have a habit of just really playing into those self-undoing practices where we want this thing, but we're also on an unconscious level just doing so many things to kind of undermine that. And it's just once you see that and you're able to change that, the difference is just so completely night and day.
That is so true. The unconscious is so powerful.
um did you have anything else to add? We're um a little over the 30-minute mark, but
I
we
think
did.
we did pretty good. A lot
Yeah.
better than what was it, an hour and 15 minutes last time?
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
All right. So
um
if people want to connect with you and your practice, what are you offering right now and where can they connect with you?
so right now I am primarily doing tarot and tea leaf readings, and that's at tarotandchai.com. And I've got my
And
booking calendar and everything there.
oh, fantastic. And I am primarily doing astrology readings, and I am doing lectures for my Patreon patrons. And if you'd like a reading from me, you can get a reading at adapembroke.com/readings. And if you want to connect with me on Patreon, I am also at patreon.com/adapembroke. And you can find me on Instagram at adapembroke.
And for those of you watching on Apple, Google, or Spotify, we'll have links in the description as well. Just very briefly, did you want to cover a little bit about the Moon Dreams bundle that you have available on your site? Because that ties in with a lot of the things that we've been talking about.
Absolutely. So the Moon Dreams bundle is something that we collaborated on together. I made a collection of digital journals and we came together and we made a calendar to go along with them. The calendar helps you to track the lunations and gives you prompts for journaling and helps you understand what the lunation is about. So, if you want to plan ahead and think about the lunation before we come out with our podcast, you can look at the event in the calendar and see what is going on with that lunation and start to plan ahead for yourself. And this calendar works with Google Calendar and any other calendar system that works with Google Calendar. So if you have an iPhone, you can use it with Apple Calendar, Apple's Calendar app. Um, and the two journals that come with it are Moon Mood Journal, which is a 150 some odd page journal that is designed to help you work with the moon as it goes through each of the signs of the zodiac and examine the way that the moon being in that sign makes you feel, because the moon is the planet of feelings, and as it journeys through the signs, it is interacting with your own emotional signature. And so everybody is going to feel differently when the moon is in each of the signs. So um, Moon Mood Journal helps you to understand the textbook astrological understanding of the moon and the signs, but also in my Aquarian moon way, invites you to examine your own relationship and see what trends there are in your life. And Moon Dreams, a manifestation journal, helps you to um, put together a practice of working with the new and the full moon. Like I mentioned earlier, I have been working with setting intentions at the new moon and then seeing them manifest 6 months later at the full moon in the same sign for years now. And I codified that and turned it into a pretty printable journal that you can work with yourself, so that you can basically walk in my footsteps until you can put together a practice of your own.
Alrighty, and I think that's all we have for today. So thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Bye.
Bye bye.